everyone. Welcome to another episode of Policy Beats. Today, I am joined here with Ms. Tanzila Khalil. She is a research fellow at IPRI. She was previously affiliated with Arms Control and Disarmament Affairs as an Assistant Director Research, and apart from that, she has been a visiting research fellow at the Atlantic Council and a fellow at RSIL as well. So, today we will be discussing some interesting things related to the discipline of strategic studies, all about the nuclear and the missiles. Hello मैम, थैंक यू सो मच फॉर जॉइनिंग अस।
Hi Javeria, thank you for having me.
अच्छा, पहले तो आप हमें ये बताएं ना कि स्ट्रेटेजिक स्टडीज़, मिसाइल्स, गन्स, बुलेट्स, बंदूकें और ये सारा कुछ क्यों, यही पढ़ने का शौक क्यों आपने रखा?
I think I was in this discipline by default. I opted for defense and diplomatic studies as my bachelor's, which was just very attractive to me when I saw the prospectus of that university, and
अच्छा
I
अच्छा।
just opted for that. So then that's that. And when I started studying, so I started developing interest in the subject, and then I did my MPhil in strategic and nuclear studies from National Defense University, and then I was inducted in the SPD. So from there, my interest has never slowed down in this field. So here I am studying about missiles and guns and nuclear things.
नो दैट्स वंडरफुल बिकॉज मतलब जब से आई थिंक न्यूक्लियर का ज़्यादा जो हम हिस्ट्री अगर पढ़ते भी हैं या पढ़ाई भी जाती है तो हम लोग वर्ल्ड वॉर्स की तरफ जाते हैं। एक पूरी टाइमलाइन चल रही है ऑफ द कोल्ड वॉर बिटवीन द टू कंट्रीज, बट बिफोर दैट व्हाट हैपेंड विद जापान एटसेट्रा एटसेट्रा. Coming forward, Pakistan eventually acquired its own nuclear arsenal
Yes.
as you know, to sort of secure itself from the Indian threat. लेकिन आज की जो ग्लोबल लैंडस्केप चल रही है उसमें बहुत सारी हमने ट्रीटीज़ भी की, उससे बहुत सी कंट्रीज़ को फ़ायदा भी हुआ। आपने न्यूक्लियर एनर्जी को या न्यूक्लियर जो एक सब्सटेंस है उसको हमने एक अच्छी चीज़ों के लिए भी इस्तेमाल किया, न्यूक्लियर फॉर पीस एंड स्टफ लाइक दैट। तो अभी इस वक्त हम देख रहे हैं कि दोबारा जियो पॉलिटिक्स का एक सॉर्ट ऑफ पीक पे वो चीज़ें आ रही हैं। कंट्रीज़ आर बैक टू यू नो वांटिंग टू गो, क्या कहते हैं, लॉक हेड्स विद ईच अदर. How do you see, you know, the sort of implications of this particular strategic modernization that are being undertaken by major nuclear powers like the US, Russia and China, और अब तो इंडिया भी उसमें आ रहा है?
Undoubtedly. So there is no denying the fact that the international nuclear global order is continuously evolving and is undergoing significant changes, and all the nuclear weapon states right now are in some manner developing and developing the technology both in qualitative and quantitative terms.
Right.
But when we come to major powers like US, Russia and China, they are the ones who are at the top of developing these technologies. Recently, US and Russia and China are developing technologies like hypersonic missile systems and submarine-launched ballistic missiles, and expanding their existing BMD capabilities. So I think that has changed the international nuclear global order overall. China is also developing similar technologies, but China is not constrained under any arrangement like New START, which US and Russia are a part of in the development of its nuclear capability. So this, I think the changes at the global level will not remain confined to just these three major nuclear powers. It does have a trickle down effect to other regions, specifically when we talk about South Asia,
Right.
because India is emerging as a key player in the South Asian region for the great power rivalry, specifically between the US and China, and the US strategy of containing China. So to this end, the US particularly is propping up India militarily, and India is developing advanced weapon systems like ballistic missiles, hypersonic ballistic missiles, submarine-launched technologies, and nuclear submarines, and the BMD system. So it is kind of it is having negative implications for the very fragile deterrent stability that already exists between India and Pakistan. And Pakistan feels compelled to take corrective measures to restore the stability that India is trying to destabilize.
Okay, quite interesting. Could you also deep dive a little bit more into how these advancements in the nuclear delivery systems, including hypersonic missiles and SLBMs, impact the global security landscape further than what we're already seeing?
Yes, it clearly does affect the global order. First of all these new developments are a triggering factor for instigating arms race in other countries.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly in most cases, just for the countries are developing technologies just for the sake of showcasing their technological prowess and telling the other country that we also have that military edge.
Mm.
First, second, the newer development of new weapon system will necessitate the requirement for nuclear testing also to
Right.
validate the new designs. And now coming to the specifics about hypersonic missiles, hypersonic missiles are considered to be a destabilizing factor, primarily because of their uh, accuracy,
Mm-hmm.
speed, and their ability to penetrate and evade the existing ballistic missile defense systems. So it undermines the deterrence which is
Okay.
existing between any two nuclear adversaries.
Hmm.
Secondly, with regards to SLBMs, which are submarine launched ballistic missiles, they were traditionally considered to be a stabilizing factor because they ensured the survivability of the nuclear forces
All right.
between US and USSR during the Cold War.
Okay.
However, the same cannot be argued for the deployment of SLBMs in our case in South Asian region, because I think they are a factor for crisis instability between India and Pakistan, because the deployment of submarines armed with SLBMs may exacerbate tensions due to the uncertainty surrounding their movements and intentions in case of India and Pakistan. So these are the things that are quite challenging for with regards to these new weapon systems that the states are introducing.
Hmm. So, after all, is सबकी वजह से we're also maybe witnessing a deterioration of the state of arms control as well. So, what role do you see, or what role do emerging security threats, particularly from China, play in shaping the perspectives of these other major nuclear powers towards the arm control arrangements?
So I think China is now becoming quite a major player when it comes to U.S. security threat
Mm-hmm.
perception. Initially, in the official documents that the U.S. State Department releases, I think every year, that is the national security strategy of the U.S. Earlier, they mentioned Russia to be their main threat, but in
Right.
the last two NSS documents, China has been portrayed as the U.S. main
Hmm.
threat. So, in that context, the Chinese strategic developments, and as discussed earlier, the fact that China is not bound under any international obligation not to develop new weapon systems and warheads, this has made US and Russia come out of their traditional bilateral arms control arrangements, also, that
Okay.
we'll be discussing later on. Um, which were the arms control arrangements were traditionally considered to be a stabilizing factor between US and USSR.
Hmm.
However, these arrangements are seen as limiting their options vis-a-vis Chinese emerging threat now.
Okay. Okay.
So that's the reason they are now coming out of these treaties.
Hmm.
For instance, the abrogation of INF Treaty, Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty. The rationale behind coming out of this particular treaty was that the US and USSR, US and Russia wanted either to expand the INF treaty's membership,
Mm-hmm.
make it a multilateral treaty other than being a bilateral treaty, or abrogate it entirely so
Okay.
that they can rebuild their own nuclear deterrent capability in the context of the growing Chinese
So I
threat.
think it's safe to argue that a lot of these treaties and these regimes were created for the benefit, more towards the benefit of the United States at that time, and now they want to revisit it
Yes,
to achieve, maximum benefit against
exactly.
the emerging nuclear power that is China.
Exactly.
So that's quite interesting. Which also brings me to the question then: what are the alternative mechanisms or approaches that then could be pursued to sort of enhance the practice of arms control and to promote the idea of strategic stability with the current international environment?
Interesting. I think it's a tough area to dwell in because arms control arrangements are traditionally and historically considered to be the only mechanisms governing the two states to
Right.
maintain strategic stability and ensure that it remains in
Hmm.
place. Other alternative mechanisms that could be in place to ensure strategic stability could be confidence building by CBMs,
Right.
building trust and confidence, and finally addressing the root causes of the mistrust. But given the high, extremely political charge environment, for instance, in the contemporary era, like between US and Russia, US and China, India and China, Pakistan and India, the environment is so politically charged that these states will never agree to sit on a negotiating table to resolve their the root causes of their conflicts and
Hmm.
mistrust between them. So until and unless these root causes are addressed, it is unfortunate to say, but the international nuclear order will follow the same complex trajectory.
Right.
Yes.
And again, there's election cycle happening in India. There's stuff happening all over the
Yes.
world, and it's hard to say that we're gonna make it to the negotiating table
Yeah.
anytime soon. So, with regards to nuclear testing, there's been quite a lot of debate surrounding the potential resumption of nuclear testing by nuclear armed states. And I think जब भी ये बात होती है तो if anyone's read the book Atomic Steppy, that really shows you what the nuclear testing does to a country or
Yes.
how it really adds to the escalation.
Hmm.
What do you have to say about that?
So, yes, there is an increased debate on resumption of nuclear testing, particularly in the context of Trump administration discussions in May of 2022. Uh, the discussions revolve around the argument whether the US should conduct a nuclear test again or not.
Mm-hmm.
And these particular discussions were held primarily because the US State Department issued a report on April 15, 2022, which
Okay.
raised concerns about Chinese and Russian commitments toward non-testing of nuclear weapons.
Hmm.
So, one. And the other development which highlights towards this uh, increased debate surrounding nuclear testing is that in September 2023, there was satellite imagery released exclusively by the CNN, which highlighted an increased activity in US, Russian, and Chinese nuclear test sites.
That's quite interesting.
However, there is no evidence to suggest that these three states are moving towards an imminent nuclear test, but the imagery suggests that there was expansion in on the nuclear site test sites in these three countries. So this was second. Thirdly, this particular development was followed by Russia's de-ratification of comprehensive
Absolutely.
uh, nuclear test ban treaty, also known as CTBT.
CTBT.
So Russia de-ratified it in November 2023, and the again the rationale behind that was the Russia said that now we are at par with US, who has not ratified the treaty. So Russia had ratified the CTBT, but US still has not ratified the treaty.
Right.
So, but Russia also reassured at that moment that we will not resume nuclear testing until and unless Washington does it also.
Hmm.
Uh, so these developments point in the direction of an international environment where these nuclear weapon states seem to be posturing themselves to exploit the first available opportunity to resume nuclear
Okay.
testing. I think that's very important. And again, now this will not remain confined to these three states.
Hmm.
India also seems to be quite informed with these developments regarding the nuclear testing. Also, India has for long voted against the early entry into force and universalization of this comprehensive test ban treaty. This reflects that India also has a desire to keep its option of nuclear testing open.
Open. Hmm.
Yes, and recently, Ashley Tellis, who is a very famous Indian American scholar, he also hinted towards the same and said that India may be compelled to test again. So Ashley's comments and India's repetitive consistent pattern of voting against the CTBT in the CD
Hmm.
and UNGA First Committee shows us that uh, it has been a general practice in India to test the waters before making any strategic decision.
Absolutely.
Yes. Also India has recently tested Agni 5. It's an intercontinental ballistic missile with a range of up to 5,500 kilometers, and now India has tested it in MIRV configuration. So the
Yes.
first basic requirement of MIRV capable missile is to miniaturize the warhead, and miniaturization will require India to uh, test that new weapon design, because given India's limited experience of nuclear testing in 1998 and the evolution of its nuclear missile system since 1998, will put pressure on India to resume nuclear testing in order to establish the credibility of its new weapon systems and nuclear forces, which now include missiles from ranges up 150 to 5500 kilometers, and it is also
Okay.
developing Agni 6, which will have a range of 12,000 plus kilometers. So India is clearly going beyond its what is actually required.
For the Indian national interest.
Yes.
One would then really wonder what's pushing them in that direction. Is it, the ascendancy towards being wanting to be a global power with that
Yes.
sort of range? Is it against China? Is it against Pakistan? What are they really targeting at? But I would then like to understand what sort of position then, Pakistan should take if such a thing resumes. And but like more importantly, how do you then sort of convince or take measures to actually avoid the idea of pushing for nuclear testing? What sort of mechanisms could countries actually pursue?
So first of all, addressing what Pakistan should do, Pakistan also recently proposed to India a bilateral moratorium on nuclear testing back in 2016,
Okay.
and we have this principal stance that we will not test nuclear weapons, or we will not. But we will not ratify CTBT until and unless India does. So we also
Okay.
have to keep our options open, because India has been our only security threat. So if India resumes testing, then Pakistan will also have to think about it.
Interesting.
What other measures can be taken? The traditional mechanisms to ensure nuclear non-testing included nuclear test ban treaties, CTBTO international monitoring system, verification and compliance mechanism, transparency and exchange of information on nuclear arsenals. However, given the deteriorating state of arms control and the non-adherence of states, these mechanisms now appear to be futile at best.
Right.
Yes. So I think the only option we are left with is the role of civil societies in this regard, which is very significant. They can play a significant role in preventing the escalation of nuclear testing through advocacy for disarmament, public awareness campaigns, and support for the existing international treaties and agreements governing this particular matter of nuclear
Right.
non-testing.
And I think for a very long time, a lot of countries and a lot of the discourse in the mainstream was sort of away from the nuclear discussions as well, except for obviously people like yourself who are in the field and all, catching up on these updates. A lot of the conversation today is now moving towards artificial intelligence and how that adds to issues of strategic stability and whatnot. But my next question would then be on the increasing significance of nuclear weapons in itself. We're seeing conflicts erupt in the Middle East,
Yes.
and what's going on with Russia and Ukraine, that's also a point to note. There's a very famous I don't remember, but it was either a conference or a meeting in which senior official from Kazakhstan was also present, and the Russian President Vladimir Putin was also there. And Kazakhstan was obviously, advocating for a non-nuclear sort of world. You shouldn't have nuclear weapons and whatnot. To which President Putin said that that's the exact mistake that Saddam made. So, what I'd like to learn now is what are the implications of the rising calls for nuclear weapons acquisition by non nuclear weapon states in response to the perceived security threats? Why should a country not pursue nuclear weapon, and why should a country pursue nuclear weapon?
So, given the trends that we have discussed, in the international order, there are significant voices in the non-nuclear weapon states calling for acquiring their own capability. For instance, just take in point the case of Ukraine. Ukraine gave up its nuclear capability in 1991, and now it is being faced with an existential threat in the form of Russian invasion of Ukraine. Secondly, there is issuance of active threats of use of nuclear force, again in the context of Ukraine and Palestine, whereas I think some Israeli minister threatened to use nuclear weapons against Palestine. Thirdly, the placement of the deployment of nuclear weapons on third territory. Again, in the case Russia has deployed the nuclear weapons in Belarus, in with regards to this ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Uh, and Not just these states, even South Korea and Japan have also reflected their desire to develop their own capability despite being under US extended deterrence.
Absolutely.
Yes. So I think I am a proponent of less is more and less is better, because I think even with 9 nuclear weapon states, the international nuclear order is already very complex. So the more and more states, if they are acquiring nuclear capability, I think it will be very difficult to regulate, and it will only make the situation more complex. So I think the responsibility lies on the nuclear weapon states to behave responsibly in this regard, to decrease this sentiment and calls for the non-nuclear weapon states to acquire their own capability.
बिल्कुल आपने वो रशिया उसकी सॉरी जापान और साउथ कोरिया की भी बात की एंड आई थिंक दैट सॉर्ट ऑफ एंजाइटी शोड अप विद द कॉन्फ्रंटेशन और द इन्वेजन विद Ukraine. That's
exactly
the point at which they realized, okay, we might need to be a little bit more, militarily advanced enough to ensure that North Korea or China or any other country does not, come for
North
our
Korea
country.
also figures quite prominently in the South Korea and Japan.
Absolutely.
Specifically in South Korea case, to call for developing their own nuclear capability.
Exactly.
Yes.
And I think with the current situation that's happening over there, one's not sure how long South Korea is going to want to take the guarantees of
From
the Western
US,
world
yes.
and from the US. And then, of course, that also brings me to the question, how do you then ensure you being a nuclear state tell the other country that you cannot have a nuclear weapon while I have it and I will provide you that security? What sort of guarantees should, really make a country be convinced about it?
I think it's extremely significant for the nuclear weapon states to address the discontent among the non-nuclear weapon states with regards to all this debate. One of the major source of frustration for the non-nuclear weapon states is the lack of transparency and accountability among the nuclear weapon states towards their commitment to disarmament under Article 6 of Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT. Yes. So the non-nuclear weapon states, without any exception, all of them, I do not think they are interested in moving towards disarmament. So short of disarmament, what they can do to guarantee the non-nuclear weapon states, number one, their commitment to uphold moratoriums on non-testing of nuclear weapons. Secondly, it would be useful if the nuclear weapon states could ensure vertical non-proliferation and non-introduction of new weapon systems. And thirdly, another long-standing demand of the non-nuclear weapon state is the unconditional provision of negative security assurances, which primarily means that the nuclear weapon states would not use or threaten to use nuclear weapons against non-nuclear weapon states. Yes, and this could only be done either through a new treaty or unconditional ratification of all the nuclear weapon free zones in the world. So these are a few steps that the nuclear weapon states could take to address the discontent among the non-nuclear weapon states.
Any degree of this being done so far? Any examples of that?
Yes, there are nuclear weapon free zones in place, but there are states who have not ratified those nuclear weapon free zones. So that is what I was saying, that the unconditional ratification of nuclear weapon free zones will only ensure that the nuclear weapons states will not use nuclear weapons against the non-nuclear weapon states.
So my concluding question to you then would obviously be on the Pakistan-India dynamics of
Of course.
this particular discipline. So what measures do you think can be taken to mitigate the risk of an arms race between India and Pakistan resulting from their respective strategic modernization programs?
Hmm. So the last thing first, I don't think there can be any measures to mitigate the arms race until and unless they are also being contained and curtailed at the global level, because there is a
Absolutely.
chain reaction.
Mhm.
If US is making a new weapon or developing a new technology, it will affect Russia. Russia will develop the same thing. Then it
Hmm.
will affect China. China will also want to develop a counter to that
Yes.
capability, and when China will develop, India will feel
India will do
threatened, and
that.
India will also develop the technology, and
So will
lastly,
Pakistan.
yes, so will Pakistan do. So I think at the global level, the arms control arrangement needs to be in place. Secondly, our strategic modernization program, Pakistan's nuclear weapon program, the basic rationale of Pakistan's nuclear program was to uh, cater towards the Indian conventional superiority at that time.
Right.
Yes. So, unless and until India behaves rationally and
Hmm.
with regards to its strategic developments, I think it's hard for Pakistan to unilaterally propose arms control and
Hmm.
mechanisms to curtail arms race in the region. Also, with regards to India and Pakistan, we have a history of hostility. We have fought 3 wars. There is a recurrence of conflicts between the two countries. So again, until and unless we resolve the outstanding disputes, in this case primarily Kashmir, I don't think we can move forward to any other measure that
Hmm.
can be in place. Also, it's very important, there is the absence of arms control arrangement at bilateral level in South Asia is also one of the main factors uh, uh, that makes it challenging to mitigate the risks of arms race.
Arms race.
Yes.
All right, that's quite interesting, but we hope it doesn't go beyond a certain level so that both our
I think it is
countries,
already going beyond a certain
with the
level
MERV
with
and everything, yeah.
India's strategic developments that do not cater for deterring either China or Pakistan. They are clearly going beyond the region. As I already mentioned, with the development of Agni 6, which will have a range of
Hmm.
12,000. It is not yet tested, it is still under development, but it has a range of 12,000 kilometers. So it has Indian missile program has a global strike range. It is not confined to the region.
And naturally,
Yes,
Pakistan would feel anxious over it,
of
rightly
course.
so. With that being said, thank you so much, ma'am, for taking out the time for this conversation. I mean, there's many more questions, but
Mm,
I'd be happy to take those in another episode.
yeah.
Any last thing, any last comments that you'd like to
No,
share?
just thank you so much, Joelia, for having me. It was interesting to be on the show.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank you so much, everyone. See you again on another episode of Policy Beats.